to this strategy and policy meeting. We've got 2 councillors on Zoom, and I hope the sound is working now. I'll ask Councillor Mackenzie to open with karakia, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho. Tuia tātou te tangata, kei te kaupapa o te hui nei, kei te kaupapa o te rangi nei, muri ora ki a tātou katoa. Bind above, bind below, bind within, bind beyond, bind us the people to the purpose of our meeting, to the purpose of this day, breathe life into all of us.
Thank you for that. So apologies. I've got apologies this morning from Deputy Mayor Bryant and Councillor Greening, and apologies for lateness from Mayor King, who will be in and out because he's been at Civil Defence this morning, some briefings, and yeah, he's not walking in yet. So would someone like to move that those apologies be accepted? Councillor Maru, seconded Councillor Kilmont. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Public forum is nil. We've got nobody in public forum. Any declarations of interest this morning? Councillor Hill.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, but you could turn your sound up slightly.
Okay, so this is new for us. We've been waiting to get confirmation that you can actually hear us now, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Although I know that the sound system hasn't been as good the last couple of weeks. So if it gets worse, let us know if you could. But I'd like to welcome Board Member Dixon to the table. He's made the trip over the hill. He's taking a risk that it's not going to rain too much and he can get down. He can get down the valley. There's no late items. So next item of business, we've got confirmation of minutes of the strategy and policy meeting of the 19th of February to be confirmed as a true and correct record. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Dakey moved, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And then we have the confidential minutes of the strategy and policy meeting held on the 19th of February 2025. I need a mover and a seconder there as well. Councillor Dowler moved and Councillor Dakey seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And we'll move to reports. So the first one is my chair's report. I'm happy to take that as read. I've had another meeting in relation to the water plan and the land disturbance just briefly this morning with the Mayor. So we've got a workshop next week. So that will come to you because the staff have a plan ahead. And other than that, I see the government is moving at pace with RMA reform. So I'm happy to move my report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ellis, I'll put that unless there's any questions. None. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Oh, yeah, mic on, sorry. Barbara, if you'd like to come up, and this is our quarterly climate change report, and Anna's coming to support you, actually. And Kat as well. Okay. So over to you, and we've had one dodgy microphone, so I'm not sure which one it is. But we'll tell you.
Is that the dodgy one?
So
we can share.
Over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning, everybody. So that we are going to be discussing the you received, excuse me, the climate change quarterly report, and I would like just to clarify paragraphs 311, the paragraphs that is in relation to the Tasman biodiversity strategies, which specify that the strategy is being presented to council and with an implementation plan. To be a little bit more specific, the biodiversity strategy was already presented several years ago to council, and it was presented in its implementation plan, which has been finalized, has been presented not to mayors and councillors, but only to, at the moment, to 3 councillors, which is Councillor Ellis, Councillor Maru, and Councillor Butler. So, excuse me, so we need to just provide some more clarity on this paragraph. And so I guess that, shall we take the report as read? I would like to just very quickly, just if you allow me, 30 seconds, provide just an update on an item which is important for our council, which is the growing pace in which our government not only is proceeding with the resource management reforms, which have an adaptation, a climate change adaptation, a natural hazard component, a disaster management component, but as well the government is proceeding at pace with the adaptation framework. And so that we're still, from what we understand, by the end of the year, we should be looking at what this framework, this climate change adaptation framework, is going to look like. So we might have some clear type of direction. And on that note, we open the floor to any question that you might have and we can answer. Thank you.
Councillor Maru has got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam President. I've just got two quick questions. So, Barbara, 3.2, just a question, does that report need to be, is it a requirement to have an external auditor? And what is the cost of that external audit? So in terms of thanks.
Yes.
Through the chair. So what we decided with the long-term plan budget for the climate action plan the middle of last year was that we'll move to bi-yearly, once every 2 years. And so this year we're paying for it, but then next year we'll still do the calculations and not have it audited, and then go back to paying for it. And it's pretty cheap. It's around about 7,000 compared to other providers who were offering 50,000. So we've got a good deal.
So I guess my question is, do we need to have it externally audited? And because that's a third of the savings that we just made from something else last week. So is it a requirement to have it externally audited, or is it just a best practice, understanding it's now every 2 years instead of annually?
At this stage, it's just best practice.
Okay, thank you. And then 3.9, it's around the practice note with Nelson City Council. So if my memory serves me right, do we measure sea level rise and inundation differently between councils, or is this a move to do it the same as both councils?
Yes, I can answer on that one. Yes, at the moment we do, but we're doing work to start aligning our work more and more together, seeing ways where we can really discuss with the measurements. I mean, the measurement do differ across councils because that's a practice. That's because there is not a lot of clarity on things. But we are really doing work together to see how we can align and follow best practice internationally, which is pretty much having a modeling type of way that is consistent throughout local government, so that we really utilize efficiency of scale, both in terms of information, so that it's, nationally wise, we can tell one story, but as well in terms of costs, so that, everything will be more, instead of being bespoke to each council, it will be cost effective. So yeah, it will take a little bit of time, but yes, we are doing
That's fantastic news,
yeah?
Because I'll understand it better when we talk the same language. So thank you.
Exactly right. That's the idea.
Right, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just want to understand a little bit more now where we're at with the Nelson Tasman Regional Climate Risk Assessment. So, this project's been ongoing for quite some time now. In fact, maybe years, actually. So I guess just a couple of questions. Is our investment to date consistent with the budget that we've set aside for this project? And then my second question is, given, for example, that we're working on a natural hazards plan change, how are we using the output of this tool to help inform that process?
Okay, through the chair. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, this project is run with some significant delays. And I'm pleased to let you know that we finally have received the second draft of the National Development Climate Change Risk Assessment, which is the main one of the main deliverables. The actual assessment. That's what we secure the consultants to deliver to us. The tool is a byproduct, that it's a service that this consultant is developing. So it's not something that we are getting. So this is a startup. It takes a little bit of time. To answer your question, is we had a $80,000 allocation for this project, and that the budget has not increased despite the delays. We have stopped paying the consultant last September, and the work is being carried out both for both council and no further cost, because the delays were coming from this kind of work. So no further delay. To answer your question about the National Hazard Plan change, the National Hazard Plan change, through the plan change, and the work that we're doing, as you know, we have just launched an external natural hazard viewer. That's a viewer. There is a difference between the Resilience Explorer that we are in the process of, that we're looking at as a service, as an external service, and a viewer itself, which is usually a passive type of tool to inform both, to inform the community. But the good news is that because of the work that has been done around the National Hazard Viewer, we have now updated a data set of 21 data sets information, which is going to be extremely useful for us to put at any stage when we are ready in a Resilience Explorer, in a risk type of geospatial tool, whatever that tool is going to be, which will inform our climate change risk assessments. So if that answers your question.
Yeah, so just a couple of, so coming back to the assessment, which I think you said, Barbara, we've had delivered to us now. So the assessment, is it a document?
Yes.
Okay, and so is that a document that is able to be shared?
Yes.
Just
Yes.
we need to get it peer reviewed, Councillor. Sorry to jump in. There's a peer review process we need to do, and then it'll be shared.
All right, and so, and I'm assuming then that we haven't set aside a budget to use their ongoing tool as a service, but that we have the necessary data layers, etc., that we need to essentially run our business.
Dwayne, please, you come to the table and inform us.
Through the chair, so $25,000 has been set aside to and included in the annual plan at this point still to fund the subscription to the Risk Explorer. One thing I need to say is the Risk Explorer, which is separate from the risk assessment, we haven't got the final product yet, and we've scheduled an assessment for a governance group inside council to make an assessment of that tool in May, and then make a call about whether we think it's a good investment or not. It would be fair to say that all the data that goes into that tool comes from council. It's about how the tool represents it and analyses it, which is where the extra value comes in. And we just haven't got to the point of making it whether we like it or not. That people have been using it for free and looking at the beta versions as kind of an exploratory approach. But this product still an open question about whether we'll invest in that.
All right, Councillor Shalcreed.
Yeah, through the chair. Just 3.1, the Tasman reconstruct. I mean, obviously some big numbers in there of stuff that's not being put into landfill. Are we managing to sort of, well, you can just run me through exactly what the process is with that stuff that we've saved. Are we getting rid of it? How's that working? And also about the feasibility assessment for the commercial stuff.
Yeah, 3.1, that says 700 daily division reaching 712 kgs a day in early 25.
Through this year. None of us sitting here have the further information about that. What we ask our whole team who are involved with implementing the climate action plan to provide updates, and then we collate it all into this report for you. So sorry, we can't answer your specific question, but we can find out for you.
Well, I'm sure you could ask, it'd be David Stevenson probably, if you could ask David to let Councillor Shalkeris know.
Yes, we can do that. Thanks.
Because I know it's been something that we've been working on with the construction industry for quite a while. And while there's a downturn, it's a good time to do that. All right, no more questions. So we've got the motion up on the board that we will receive the quarterly climate update, and we'll await the result of this rain warning with interest over the next few hours. So would someone like to move? Councillor McKenzie, you happy to move the report? Seconded, Councillor Maru. I'll put the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We'll move on to notification of draft Lakes Murchison Ward RMP and draft RMP section on Agents Bush Scenic Reserve. And I think, Anna, you're in the chair as well, and Grant's come to assist you.
Kia ora anō. So I'm happy to bring this report to you today with two documents we're requesting your approval for public notification so that we can hear what the public think about them. The Lakes Murchison Ward Reserve Management Plan, the current version, is from 2005, so it's 20 years old, well overdue for review. The other thing we're wanting to consult on is the draft section on Agents Bush Scenic Reserve in Pigeon Valley, which the council purchased just after we approved the Moutere Waimea Ward Reserve Management Plan. So we're asking for approval to publicly notify and then appoint a hearings panel as well. I just want to also table, you should have received an LG Hub yesterday, this proposed amendment to the section on Tapawera Memorial Park Recreation Reserve. So throughout the both plans, we are asking a series of key consultation questions, which are summarised in my report there. And for the hub, we were going to originally just ask about two potential locations on Tapawera Memorial Park, but at the last minute, we're wanting to add in one extra, option 3 there, which is the one on the top right, behind the Foursquare. And so in track changes, you can see the proposed edits to the text there. So I would like to, oh, sorry, Kelsey, I probably didn't add an extra resolution in that we adopt that text as well. I might need to add a resolution there, sorry. But yes, we need to think, I would like to go on the hearing panel if you are willing to put these out for public notification. So happy to take questions. Thank you.
The manager just wants to add something, and I have had some interest from 3 councillors to go on the panel. So that's why we propagated some names.
The reason I just wanted to explain the rationale of having Tapawera Hub in there as part of the consultation document. When we ran the workshop, you recall there was a desire to talk to the community on the hub. We thought this was the best vehicle to do it because it's a broader conversation, not just focused on the hub. So that's why we decided to include it in as part of this consultation. So I'm trusting you're comfortable with that.
Right, so I've got the motion up there. I've got these 3 councillors have volunteered to do some work, extra work. So that's good that they've done that. Councillor McKenzie's got a question.
Thank you. Yes, I was talking to Deputy Mayor Bryant yesterday just to confirm he is happy with the change in the wording. I am happy to be on the hearing panel, as is Deputy Mayor Bryant, and very happy that Councillor Ellis is happy to chair it if this group should wish that to happen. But Anna, thank you very much for a huge amount of work once again on another of these reserve management plans and really appreciate the work you've done and the way you go about it. Thank you. And I'm happy to move the resolutions.
All right, so I've got Councillor Walker and then Councillor Murray. So Councillor Walker, but we've got a mover. I'll need a second.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Mayor, sorry. Well, we're having upgrades today. We've got a president and a mayor.
Yeah.
Apologies. Thank you through you, Chair. Just a quick question. So 2.4, when you're talking about the Tapawera Community Hub, is that preempting anything? What messaging will that send out to that community about those sites?
I don't think it does because we're considering more than, I think originally they were only looked at one site. So I think this is looking at more sites and feedback from the community may identify more.
So mindful that we had a workshop which is behind closed doors. So this is our first release of what that looks like. Are we comfortable with that?
Well, I'm certainly comfortable with it at some stage. Martin's come to the table.
Through the chair, there is ongoing, obviously, conversations with the Tapawera Connect and TDCC who are across these locations. And obviously we are looking at the next opportunity to start socialising that. Generally, we have a workshop next week where we will be putting the sort of final questions that were asked or responses to the questions that were asked at the last workshop. So that this is, I guess, is our sort of first initiation out to the community around these locations.
I think there is definitely a timing issue here, which there is, but we're sort of up against it a little bit with this process. But we think this is the best process to have a good conversation and try and connect as much as we can. And this is more about the location as opposed to the project, which is part of an LTP.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging the timing, because mindful that we asked for more information and the workshop has been pushed out because I know we've got other priorities that have come on board. So I was a little bit surprised to see it in today's agenda when we know that the workshop has been pushed out and we don't have any of that, but happy to, sit with that. My other question is, it quotes in there that we have where have I got it? A campground, where have I written this? Someone can rescue me if they can find it quicker than me with my little highlights everywhere here. Anyway, we're not making money off a said site by whether we put this in or out of the documentation. How many of these sites do we currently have where there are camping facilities, campground facilities at low cost, but currently returning no income to the council?
Just through the chair. So this would be the only one like this at Owen River. There's currently an arrangement with the tavern owner to, I guess, look after that site. They keep the grass down with some sheep, and they actually get the revenue, take the bookings, and clean the toilets. But we are keen to have conversations with that person, and because I believe that that's on the market, so that could change. I've also had discussions with DOC about this site. They weren't interested in us considering handing it back to them because of their current financial position, but they said if we did, they would end up probably just grazing it, allowing it to remain open. But whether that would remain as a campground is unknown.
Okay, Councillor Murray and then Dale and then Campbell.
I'm happy to second, but mine was a similar subject to Councillor Walker's in terms of the language in the consultation document on Tapawera says it's more stronger. Council is proposing to build the new hub at either of these two locations, and so it's not a either or question or the other side of what other side. So I get that you've been doing some work with some key stakeholders, but the wider community is a bit you need to get on board with this project, because I understand from the conversations we had that it's not fully supported by the Tapawera community. So it'll only draw a bigger rift if some people are probably to some knowledge and then this drops and you haven't engaged wider. So just the caution in terms of the timing. It felt weird to me as well. But happy to move.
But thanks for seconding. It's already been moved. In all of these community projects, there's a significant component of community money has to be raised before they start. So they might be in the long-term plan, but
just for the chair, it's not necessarily the case in this case because there's a lot of government money sitting there. So it's not the same skin in the game necessarily.
Councillor Dowling.
Just wake up, hang on. 2.3, the one that Trinity was referring to before, about the dockland and blah, blah, blah. Is there a dollar value that you could throw in the mix when you go out for consultation? Because I'd read that and go, half a dozen paddocks probably don't cost much to maintain those. But if you put something like it's costing us 100 grand a year or something, it may trigger someone to go, get out of it. Let's go away and give the land back whether they want it or not.
So I think it's probably a different conversation, Anna. I would suggest this is about the Reserves Act and the requirements under that. What you're talking about is it financially viable, which is, for me, my advice to you is that's a different conversation we can have, but not during this process. Would that be fair to say, Anna?
Yeah, through the chair. So reserve management plans are statutory management plans that just sort of by general principle do not really talk about resources other than as resources allow or something kind of generic. Yeah, whereas then the actual activity management plans for reserves and facilities will feed through how these projects will be implemented in future. So we have kind of specifically not talked about costs of things in here, but yeah, I guess that's our style.
Yeah, that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, I just and I know we've got an ex-stock employee in the room, but there is a lot of councils do hold significant responsibility for what is central government land. That'd be right, Grant. So I think part of the next long-term plan conversation has to be with the next council on clarity on what we actually hold, what we're responsible for, what we maintain, and some decisions need to be made, as I think, in the next council. So we'll have that on the list for the next long-term plan and suggest that's the best vehicle for that.
Thanks for that. And I think that is a relevant conversation. Councillor Kinnemore.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair and Madam Assistant Chairperson. Clause 6 up there. If available, up to 2 Maturanga Maori experts to be appointed. Is this a new process? And the second thing is another person appointed to the panel if a panel, should the appointed member of the panel be unavailable. So the word unavailable, I just need clarification what that means. So just a process, I've never seen that before.
Yeah,
It's standard actually that we've put in the last 2 or 3 hearings. If an appointed councillor isn't available, we fill that vacancy because they have to be present for the hearing because things can come up. And we've had Maturanga Maori experts on these panels for the last 6 or so years that I can recall.
Okay, I've never been on a panel with 2 experts. I must be too low down the pay scale.
I've served on several and they really add value. So that's a comment. Councillor Dakey.
Thank you. I think I know how this works through the chair. The management plan, then you've got your activity plan, and then you've got what the community sees on the ground. When people put in their submissions or comments, often it's a lot lower down, it's more granular. So we have a process for catching those. So, little Jimmy writes in and says, I'd love a slide. It's not the right place, but we capture that and put that into future processes.
Yes, and the hearing panel will get all submissions, or like in full as well as summarised. So, but yes, we then use information to inform other processes internally.
Okay, no other questions. So it's been, I think it was moved, Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Maru. I'll put the, bless you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Councillor Butler, was that you? No? All right, so we'll carry on. Next is economic regulation of water services, information disclosure. Alan, this is you. I can voice an opinion. I don't think it's the best bit of legislation that I've seen. In honesty.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, this is about the council submission to I guess the first step towards the economic regulation of water services for the Commerce Commission. So yeah, this is around a process called information disclosure. So effectively, the Commerce Commission will require water service providers to provide specific types of information consistently. So so that they and consumers and other stakeholders can kind of benchmark the performance of one water services provider against another as a part of that kind of regulatory framework. So this is the first bit of consultation that the Commerce Commission have put out, which is really setting up the sort of framework for that information disclosure. We've prepared a submission for the council, and that was due in on I think the 26th of March. So the mayor signed that off, and really now just seeking retrospective approval for that submission. So with that, I'll take the report as read and happy to answer questions.
Well, it's already been submitted, but the comment from the chair is that this is going to cost water users about $500,000, roughly, if you take into account all the auditing that's going to be of our delivery of water. And I just think that's a cost to water users. When you add in Te Mana Ōtuai, Commerce Commission and Audit New Zealand, I just think it's ludicrous. Personal opinion.
Yes. So again, through you, Mr. Chair, one of the key points that we made in our submission was really trying to encourage the Commerce Commission and the other regulators to align as much as possible. So if they're asking for the same information, can they ask for it in the same way at the same time period, so that so that it doesn't have to be duplicated and the costs aren't any higher than they actually need to be.
That would be good. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I guess we will have some assurance that if we're having to do this information disclosure, and we've just heard some of the costs bantered around of what it's going to be, that we will be sharing that beyond just today's meeting out to our communities, because I can see us being hammered over the costs of some of these things, which again, we have no say around. So can we have some assurance from our comms team that they will front some of these conversations prior to us being hammered in our community?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, to be honest, I'm not particularly aware of the costs of this. I've really prepared with input from other staff, prepared a submission on the discussion document from the Commerce Commission. So I'm not really well placed to talk about the costs.
I'm sure in the future that will be something that will come about. I'm looking at Mr. Kirby.
Of course, all the requirements being placed on us in terms of water quality and the like, and the way we discharge is going to add cost. And this one's only a portion of the rest of it. As far as communicating with the community, we're putting a consultation document together on council's options and preferred option on the water services. Though that does allude to the fact that there will be extra costs, it doesn't actually talk about what those costs are likely to be. They do talk about the costs over the next 10 years or so across all three waters, but not specifically for each water. So, but that will probably come out in time. Yeah.
Okay. Mayor King and then Councillor Dow. Oh, I thought you nodded.
No, I think that the two key points I think have already been discussed. One is ensuring that there are a range of entities that are expecting or requiring reporting across this activity, and trying to ensure as much as we possibly can that they accept, and I think it was already covered by Alan, the same information, the same format, hopefully in similar timeframes, so that we can do one lot of reporting that satisfies the various different regulators' requirements. That's one thing. And then coming back to the cost, I mean, I think we have a general idea of what the cost of Taumata Arawa's oversight is going to be charged to us at, and we have a reasonable understanding of the cost of the Commerce Commission's charge to oversee it as well. We already know that Audit New Zealand is a significant cost both annually and when we do a 10-year plan. So what we're not fully sure of is the cost of implementing some of the requirements and rules and regulations, and that will only become apparent, I guess, as the regulation starts to take effect.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Dowler, and then we will go back and let David Stevenson report.
Yeah, I just started ball rolling. I'm happy to move.
I've got a mover. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Mara, not a first. So look, this is retrospective, so we'll put this. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Sorry. Question earlier about the diversion of construction waste. And how's it going?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, at Richmond, the construction waste that is separated is going to Nelson Environment Centre, as would have taken some of the untreated timber for processing into wood products. Scrap metal's been removed, and we're also working with Habitat for Humanity and exploring other options with other not-for-profits.
I noted in the report it said about 700 kilos a day, roughly.
Yeah, it's correct. In the last few weeks, or couple of months, it's really been increasing quite significantly.
Councillor Dowler, have you got a question?
Yeah, I do actually. Do you communicate with the recycling centre in Motueka, Wikapeka, at all? Because I understand they've bowled over about 5 houses in the last year and done everything that you're talking about.
Yes, we do. In fact, we invited Wikapeka to come and collect material from that site as well. So yeah, it's a real balance between what we're trying to assess at the moment is what's the most efficient and cost-effective way to do it, separate on site or receive material mix. So we're seeing a lot of different activities. So some construction firms are separating on site. Others are bringing mixed material or segregated loads to Richmond. And just for your information, there's a government announced last Friday a product stewardship proposal for farm plastics, but they've signalled that plastics from construction activities could be included in that product stewardship as well.
Councillor Dowler?
So if a building company rocks up with the whole mixed waste, do they get charged any extra because you're going to sort it, or do they just pay the same amount?
We wouldn't normally accept mixed waste. We're accepting segregated waste at the moment. We did a trial of mixed waste, but it was quite expensive. So at the moment, we're focused on segregated waste.
Well, thanks for that, David. That's good, and that's certainly an improvement on where we were by a considerable amount. It'll be interesting to see how it goes when the building industry gets bigger or rebounds. Right, the next item on the agenda is the strategic policy update. So we've got Barry and Dwayne coming to the table. And you're not allowed to leave, Dwayne. Who's leading off?
I'll kick off, Mr. Chair. I'll largely take the strategic policy section of the report as read and just point out three things, if I may. Happy to have a conversation briefly, if you want, around the community occupation policy, and Kat's here if there are anything a bit more technical that you need to go into, but we are planning on having another workshop with you about that and explaining why that process is on pause, or rather delayed. Essentially, it comes down to there's a lot of administration that goes into the current system. It's horribly complex, And as we've dug more into it, we've formed the view that potentially council needs to reconsider a simpler system if it wants to administer these leases. In terms of stormwater, I just wanted to point out there's a few ambers in the update report. And that's because apart from the program being quite a large one, the resource focused on that, Ian, has been kind of diverted to a few other tasks in the last few months. One of the bigger ones, is the Hope bypass, as we feed technical information to the NZTA's business case assessment. One of the most important things in that assessment is around estimating future stormwater flows for various points along the route and making sure that we can stand behind those, so NZTA may consider factoring those into their plans. And so there's a bit of a delay on the other programs. And the other thing is around the resident survey. So in previous years, we have done phone surveys. That is no longer the way that most councils do it. Many are shifting to online surveys, so we're shifting to that too. What will happen, there'll be a mail out to 8,000 households asking them to complete an online survey, and the response rate for that kind of system is more twice what we get for a phone survey in other councils. So we're expecting to get better information as a result of that. The one meaningful consequence of that change is that we won't be able to ask as many questions as we did in previous years, because it takes longer for people to fill out online surveys than it does on the phone. But for the stuff that we need to ask around the annual report and maybe a few other questions, we should get better response rates and retain that kind of representative sample methodology that we look for. Happy to take questions.
All right, so any questions? Councillor Walker, you're looking like you've maybe got a question there. And then Councillor Kittimore.
Thank you.
Mari, so I've got a list.
Thank you, through Chair. So with that survey, Dwayne, so we're going from a phone system to a mail out system and online.
Yeah, through this year, I'll clarify. So you basically people get something in the mail inviting them to go online and participate in a survey.
Okay, so is it cost effective if we can't ask as many questions to start with? But my other concern is, how do you make that available to people who can't go online? Like they get an invite to go online, but we know there's a certain group within our community who don't have access to online. What's the alternative for them so we actually get their voice? And is this cost saving or not?
I'll deal with the last question first and then hand over to Helen to deal with people who don't have access to internet. The cost is very similar to what we have at the moment. Essentially, it's within budget and it's no more expensive than the previous system that we had. But you're right, because it costs the same amount and we're able to ask for only roughly around 2/3 the number of questions, it costs more per question.
So, Mr. Chair, on the other one, I'm pretty sure I'll just have to come back and confirm, but I'm pretty sure there's a hard copy option for people who don't have internet connection or don't use computers. So we can send them the form and they send it back type of arrangement. But I'll just confirm that after the meeting if that's okay.
Okay, Councillor Kittimore.
Thank you, through the chair. Clause 3.4, I'm looking at community occupancy policy. You're talking about bringing alternative options back to the governance group here for a workshop. When do you think you're doing that?
We were discussing that yesterday. Ideally, we'd like to do it in May. The challenge is essentially the team that needs to do this work is mostly engaged in the annual plan process and the other bylaw reviews that you've seen in the work program. So from a staff resourcing perspective, it's probably better to visit this later after June. Ideally, we'd like to do it May, but I don't think we can. We just don't have the time.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one last question.
Of course.
Thank you. Existing leases and agreements, are they just going to roll over now until, something happens.
I'll attempt to answer the question and then Kat and Alan can correct me. As I understand it, the property team are still going through and they have a lease format that they use at the moment for all of these leases, and that will need to continue. Otherwise, potentially all the renewals and all the new leases they want to strike up, they're just in kind of no man's land, and that's not really suitable for council or for the people who occupy these lands. At some point in the future, council will adopt a policy and will start rolling that out. That itself will take several years to get through as leases come up for renewal and it's changed and so on. So the change, or wherever we land up, the change will take several years to run through. So there's no really good reason to stop the current management of leases in the short term. Kat and Alan, do you want to add anything?
Councillor Murray and then Councillor Dake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually a follow-on from Councillor Kinnemoth first now. So the rollover again, so the rollover is good if you have a current lease that doesn't charge other like stormwater connections or wastewater. It's not so good if you've got a lease that does have that and then the policy changes and you've got to wait for renewal. So that change over time is absolutely having an impact on people's ability to renegotiate new terms within it. So it's just a comment. So it's coming back as the workshop. My real question was following on from Councillor Walker's, and it's the opposite, in fact. So if I get a letter in the mail saying, would you log on and do an email, I can tell you where the letter in the mail is going. It's going to go in rubbish. But if you sent me an email and I was at my computer at the time and said, would you do the survey, you've probably got more of a chance of me getting you any feedback, unless A, I'm really, really happy and I've had an exceptional service from council, or I'm really, really mad and angry and want to tell you about it. But for people that's normally, I have never, and I could never assume that I'd fill in any survey that I got out of my letterbox at the end of a week or a fortnight, because I don't even go to the letterbox. I just think going back to mail, when we're talking about turning everything else into email conversations, is a step backwards. It seems weird to me.
Through the chair, I mean, this is our dipping our toe into this for the first time. The response rate that Nelson experiences with this system is apparently at least double what we get with our phone survey. So we get we got something like a 5% response rate for the telephone survey, and apparently Nelson have been experiencing somewhere between 11 and 14% response rate for this system. So it's actually seems to be a preferred way of people of doing it. One thing that we'll do is review the system after it's been run, because there are other ways of doing it that are worth potentially exploring in the future. So Nelson, for example, it has 1,000 people, I think, or something like that are signed up and give regular feedback on some of the same standard questions through the year. But then over time, you start losing that representative nature, where you can take some confidence within, plus or minus 5% of the true views of the community at large. So yes, yep, it is. It's our first try. I still reckon we give it a go and see how it lands. It has occurred to us that because we are losing several questions, we as an organisation might need to pick up that in some other way, and we're having a conversation with the comms team about how we do that.
Mr. Ritt.
I think just to add on to that is probably when CRM goes live, we're going to have much more opportunity. The issue we face is privacy issues, which we need to sort of just work our way through. But we're going to have some opportunities with CRM to do much more instant satisfaction responses, I guess. And it's particularly pertinent, I guess, to something like a building consent. If you get a survey that's done 12 months ago, you actually want to do it straight away to get some feel.
Okay, thanks for that. So I've got Councillor Dakey and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. So the resident survey, the questions we ask, we're going to be asking less. Is there a method for people to express their true feelings? So an example would be if we ask about roading, how happy are you with the roads? Does it A, mean you're happy with the road surface, or B, you're peeved off about congestion? So often we end up with a non-descriptive response. Is there an option in there to give people just a general comment as well? Because, it's not a lot of use to us if we get a, feedback that's not relevant to what we actually want to know. We're asking about local roads, for example, when we get comments about the state highway. Is there a method in there for people just to tack on their feelings?
The final set of questions for this first day haven't yet been finalised. We know about 90% of them. Several of them provide free-form opportunities for people to provide feedback. So, for example, if they don't like something, what was it about it, or what would they like to see improved? I can't recall whether there's a general global one which says, is there any other feedback you want to provide? I might pass on to Alan, but there's still the opportunity to include that because we've, as I say, finalised it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So Dwayne's right. So in many cases, we ask a closed question about people's level of satisfaction, but there is an opportunity then for them to provide free-form comments. So we can drill down a little more into what's behind the score that they give it. I don't believe there's just a free-form question for people to just, across everything. So it's more related to the specific questions that we're asking about.
Thank you for that, because as governance, it's tremendously useful to actually know what people were thinking. It doesn't provide us without the granular a little bit, and people don't like being trapped in the closed box either. Sometimes they want to express it a bit more, so having that option is fantastic. So thank you.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it provides some of that. It's always going to be limited, so it's going to give you an indication. But again, sometimes even then, if you really want to get under the skin, then you probably need to do some further follow up in that particular area. So it'll go so far, but it won't go all the way necessarily.
Councillor Butler, good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Thanks, through you, Chair. I just wondered about what are the questions that we are losing, because I heard Dwayne say we will be losing some questions, and I'm just wondering whether or not those are questions relating to climate change or not.
Through the Chair, the primary purpose of the annual resident survey is to track our performance measures in the long-term plan. So those are the first set of questions that have priority. We must ask those, and they must be reasonably representative, otherwise audit gives us a hard time. There is a little bit of space for additional questions, and we are agreeing a priority with that for ELT. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure the climate change questions, in fact, aren't making the list at the moment. I can come back and confirm. Oh, okay, that's correct. So we asked 2 climate change questions last time, and they are no longer on the survey. Effectively, if we add those in, probably going to be breaching our 10-minute survey completion timeframe that we kind of work to. I mentioned before that we're talking with the comms team about how we pick up questionnaires that are not related to the annual report and the LTP performance measures. And I think there's quite a bit of latitude for us to do our own kind of online surveys and things like that, where we can pick these things up.
Okay, thanks. Because, given that we're going to be having to do a lot more around adaptation, that, it's helpful to know what's happening with people on the ground as regards adaptation, what they're doing, what they think they might do. And how they're getting on with insurance and that kind of thing. So a survey, some kind of separate survey could be really helpful.
Okay, we've got that. And now, any other questions of Dwayne at this time? No? Well, we'll move on to Barry's segment of the report then. And if we finish early, we'll go through till we complete the meeting, and then we'll have a break before we've got the session with the Heritage Trust at 11:30. So you might get 20 minutes more break than normal.
And through the Chair, look, I'll take my part of the report as read, but just a couple of things to touch on. Community engagement started this week in relation to our urban growth plan change and natural hazards plan change. And our drop-in sessions start with Richmond this Saturday. So really encourage you all to come along to those ones. You'll get emailed to you today some back pocket notes in relation to both those plan changes and a schedule of when the drop-in sessions are on as well. So there'll be Q&As attached to those back pocket notes for you. So you'll have a bit of a briefing ahead of those. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on, there's been a flurry of announcements in relation to resource management reform in the last week or so. And the government's released the expert advisory group's recommendations on a replacement for the RMA, and also the cabinet's decisions on how they might take that forward. So we're going to get a new system. It looks remarkably like the system that the last government introduced and then was repealed. So having a spatial plan and a plan for our natural environment and a plan for our built environment, and plus a lot of national direction. The other thing that was really notable was that
the government is pushing ahead with changes to existing national direction. So in the next few months, they're going to consult on changes to 16 pieces of national direction. That's national environmental standards and national policy statements. So they're wanting to make some very targeted changes, so they come in pretty quick. The other thing too is that it looks like the transition to the new system will be very quick, pretty much flicking the switch. If you've been around long enough, a little bit similar to when the RMA came in, when existing plans were kind of carried over, but you look to the new Act and how you manage those. Transitions at the moment scheduled for 2027, so still a couple of years away, but a lot of work to do in the meantime in terms of what we're doing.
Barry, I suppose sorry, through your chair, the obvious question is we're currently going through a number of plan changes. Do you want to maybe just talk, because that's the obvious question, why?
Yeah, good question. Through the chair, our priority ones are urban growth, and of course that's a priority for our government. The expectation is we'll carry on with that. We've got some issues around fresh water, and there's a paper that will come to strategy and policy at the next meeting regarding potential plan changes to address some pressing issues. The other plan changes going forward, when we look at the new system, the primary driver for that will be spatial planning. So getting all our constraints mapped, where growth might go, where we want to protect things, where we want to avoid growth. And a lot of the work streams we're doing feed into that. So the expert advisory group, one of their key recommendations is effectively carry forward what is now part 2 of the RMA. So they didn't explicitly say it, but when you read through it, that's what they meant. Sort of things like outstanding natural landscapes, significant natural areas, that sort of thing. So that's the work we're doing at the moment. That will feed into the new system. So there's no suggestion that those sort of aspects that we're working on, natural hazards as well, will go by the by. That'll be a cornerstone of the new system. So the work we're doing at the moment will feed into that. What we do need to look at once we've got a bit more detail when the bills do come out is how we might reprioritise the work streams that we do, so we're well placed, so we have the inputs for that new spatial plan when it's introduced. So I think there's not a lot that we're doing. I can't see anything we're doing at the moment that we should potentially stop. There might be a decision point when we get to whether we go ahead with the plan change or not, but in terms of preparatory work, that'll be needed under the new system as well. It's just which bits do we do first and which bits maybe do we pause at the moment.
Sorry, so I feel like one of those prompts on the stage. The other thing is the spatial planning, the work that we did under the previous government's thinking, a significant amount of work went into that. Is that something that will flow through into?
Expert advisory group's recommendation is that existing spatial plans are carried over. So our future development strategy, for example, that would be a transitional instrument. So it would transition to the new system, and then we would build on that. So preserving work that's already done under the existing system, so that will carry through. And the other thing is we did that big piece of scoping work with iwi and Nelson City Council when the last government's bills acts came out, and that was about how we might transition to the new system, and that stuff was really good. So the learnings that we got from that exercise will be really valuable in how we might transition to the new system. And we're talking to Nelson City at the moment about how we might potentially get aligned if we need to going forward. So we're having those discussions.
The only concern I have is a general election before 2027. So I hope they don't do what happened last time. We did all the work and then they threw it all out. I've got 3 people with questions and 4 now with Councillor Mackenzie. So we'll start Maru, Butler, Claremont and Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple. One, Barry, the Port Motueka structural plan. So I don't know if you've seen the same feedback that the ward councillors have in terms of the disappointment from some of the key stakeholders that we're failing to address access to a port, and this is about a Port Motueka structural plan. So where boats and vessels can't access our port, it calls into question the ability of doing a structural plan that might be able to cycle there, might be able to have a coffee there, but actually can't get a boat in and out there. So I'm sure you've seen the feedback, so I'm looking forward to that workshop. But is there a way forward? Because this has been going on well before my time here, and it seems like we've gone back to where it was paused previously.
Barry?
Yeah, through the chair. It's fraught, given on the landward side, council has a lot of ability to influence to make it easier for development and for activities to happen. On the seaward side, we engage with the likes of the National Coastal Policy Statement, and we have less, council has less influence to, I guess, make it easier for things to happen in that space. But one of the things the government has signalled, certainly within the next few months, is looking at changing the coastal policy statement to make things easier for infrastructure, for example. So I think my advice would be, let's see what comes out, because that might actually help in terms of the issues that port is facing in terms of access and dredging and things.
Can I, do you mind if I just add quickly to that? Sorry, Councillor. So we've done a piece of, so if you look at the stretch of plan boundary, you know, we've got the green line. So we've done some work, Barry, well, our regulatory team have done some work around what that could look like and the constraints, etc., in terms of that dredging and consenting and all that side of stuff. So that piece of work, I think, is certainly draft at the moment. I think the intent is to bring it back to the next workshop we have. The other thing is we are meeting next week with a couple of the main commercial players in there next Wednesday. They're coming in here to have a conversation so we can explain things.
And through the chair, thank you for using the word that we're not allowed to use in those workshops, because we talk about maintaining passage roads rather than dredging. So I'm glad we're at least advancing where we can call it what it is. The other part, in terms of, I hope my colleagues over Golden Bay will have dry feet today and see the weather warnings. It's just around the natural hazard plan. So again, I know there's discussions about a master plan for Motueka, but the context looks like it's the worst place in the world for natural hazards and sea level rise and inundation to live. And actually, I think we might be in that little strip that might be all right, but the science around this, where rain falls, where sea level rises, is so vague. I hate reading the connotations that some people will read this and go, gosh, we're going to get out of Motueka because sooner or later we're going to get flooded, sea level is going to rise and all this sort of thing. So I don't know how we tone that around fact and science and projections to something that will worry a lot of people. Because I think we're going to be dry this week. But around the rain rate around us isn't. And the last big flood that I can remember was Nelson Way, and then the second to last was through Queensland, Richmond. So this whole district, this whole country has these issues. It isn't just Motueka. So how we balance that in the messaging, I think, is really important.
Yep. What? So
I guess I think personally, in terms of the master plan for Motueka, I think we should be next, but I'd rather see a pause and see how Mapua pans out before we rush into it. If I can just bring that into that.
Yeah, we won't be rushing into it, I'm sure of that. We'll move on. There was more speeches than questions. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. Yeah, look, just taking up the issue of the tweaking of the national instruments. And first of all, I'd just like to say that it's reassuring to hear that that the work we've done is can be repurposed for new legislation, so that it's not being wasted. But my specific question is about the status of significant natural areas. We did pause the identification of significant natural areas, I understand, and I'm just wondering whether or not whether or not we can anticipate starting to identify those again. I understand the ecologists are still working on that. It's just that, certain places are actually starting to come up that could benefit from that sort of label for a significant natural area. So I'm wondering if you can just give an update on that, where we're at.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. That's certainly the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity is one of those national instruments that the government's indicated it's looking to make changes. Now, the SNAs will come up against this thing about preserving property rights or a new system predicated on property rights. So I guess we'll have to see how those two intersect. The expert advisory group's report recommended maintaining SNAs and outstanding landscapes, but how the government's going to manage that against their desire to protect private property rights will be interesting to see. So I think we're probably in a little bit of a wait and see at the moment in relation to that, to SNAs.
Okay, so we're still not what is council actually doing, if anything, in relation to SNAs?
Look, I'd have to find out and get back to you. I'm
That
sorry,
would be
I can't
good.
answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that for you.
That would be good to have that information. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought the government put some stuff on hold, the minister. Councillor Kittermott.
Through you, the chair, I'll have a little comment first with a question at the end. It's very good, Barry, to hear you say about aligned with our neighbours next door. That's a very good positive. And you seem positive about all the upcoming work coming our way. You don't have to answer this question, but if it affects your professional integrity, but do you think what's coming out of Wellington is going to speed up the RMA process, or is it too early to make that call yet?
Through the chair, optimistically, yes. What part of the new system is a lot of standardisation. So there'll be a lot more prescription that will go with it, more national direction. So that was one of the failings, I guess, of the RMA was it always intended to have a lot of national direction to guide plans, and that it took 20 years for any national direction to be developed, which caused all sorts of problems. So if we get the package of national direction that comes with it, it should actually speed things up and make them cheaper for the council, which would be great.
Can I just, I think, Kim, I don't know if you want to maybe, there's the whole compliance shift as well, isn't there? I don't know if there's any comments you want us to make or not on that. So through the chair on that one, yes. So the replacement of the RMA, which is in the government sense, is phase 3 of its reforms, given that council has commented on the last of the phase 2. So that's the RMA bill number 2. So there was a number of things that, as the chair referred to before, had been sort of pushed aside by the current government. They actually pulled them back in already in RMA bill number 2. So some of the stuff is coming back, and then as Barry's painted, the picture about what phase 3 looks like looks awfully similar to the structural changes that were in the different acts being separated previously. They're now coming back to roost, but there's no climate change act in that mix. So it's similar, but not exactly the same. But one of the things that they have signalled is that our regional compliance functions would be moved from sitting within councils to another entity. And so therefore standardising the compliance function across the country. So that's the signal that's contained in the expert advisory panels or expert advisory groups recommendations. And it's being signalled by the government as something that they are keen on progressing. Of course, we don't know what that looks like to see the colour of their eyes in terms of the proposals coming forward, but that is one of the big shifts for us that we're looking to respond to, and so it would occupy a lot of our energy to make sure that the regulatory settings that are being more and more set nationally are also going to be administered nationally, and what is the role of the council in between all that. Yeah,
an interesting space going forward. Councillor McKenzie, you were next.
Thank you. I was listening to a commentary the other day on the RMA and its lifespan to date. Talked about the fact that, you know, one of the failings had been this lack of national policy statements, and that had caused a lot of issues. So just to confirm, so Barry, what you're seeing is that a high level of confidence that that problem that has existed for the past 20 years looks like it's going to be rectified in the current round of reforms?
Through the chair, yes. What all the documentation indicates, and that's the expert advisory committee's report, but also the cabinet paper on how cabinet responded to that, is we will get a new act, but alongside that will be a package of national direction that relates to that act. So we've got the 2 acts to be prescriptive national direction for each one. So certainly that seems to be the plan, and the government's progressing that stuff in parallel, so that hopefully when it does land in 2026, we will have the national direction package alongside the requirements under the Act to how we take it forward. Yeah.
Thank you. And then just through you, Chair, in that framework that Cabinet signed off on. Was there or is there proposed to be a change around the definition of highly productive land, and that one of the land use classifications is coming out of that definition? And if so, what does that mean for us here in Tasman?
Yes, through the chair, yes, and that's so that'll be one of the immediate changes the government's made. So it'll be through phase 2, which is the current RMA bill changes, which I think will be enacted around the middle of the year. But they've certainly flagged this week that change will remove LUC 3. So LUC 1 is the most high quality soils down to class 8. So LUC 3 will be removed from the definition of highly productive land. Implications for Tasman are that much of the Waimea Plains is actually LUC 3. It's not LUC 1 or 2. So at that level, it does reduce potentially some of the protections for some of our highly productive land. But I guess that's where the spatial planning will be quite critical to how we move forward. One of the other things that they've signalled in terms of these immediate changes to national direction is around identifying vegetable growing areas. So that was a requirement of the National Policy Statement that got thrown out through a judicial review process, but the government's going to reinstate that. So we have asked that the Waimea Plains is identified as a key vegetable growing area, so that would hopefully counteract the loss of its status in terms of highly productive land.
We'll await the results with interest, but we should know soon, and that's something. So any further questions of Barry? If not, would someone like to move acceptance of the report? We've got Councillor Kilmont and seconded Councillor Maru. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And I'm going to ask Councillor Ellis to close with karakia. So you will get half an hour for a cup of tea and a break before our next session. Sorry.
Ke hihi te kōrero, kia wātia, kia mama te manawa o te tangata, kia u ki te ara mo tātou e ora nei, kauronga, kaurongo, ki ronga, kia tina, hui e tai.